Swamite Namine Namo Vishnuvaraya Krishna Preshthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamite Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschate Veshatarane Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam Karati Vachana Padam Gayatri Kriparu Mande Shri Gurunti. So welcome back to this Nectar Devotional session. So today we are going to discuss, or rather this is the fourth session, and today we are going to continue with the definition of pure devotional service of Uttama Bhakti. Yesterday we continued our discussion on the topic of Rasa and how Krishna is Akhila Rasamrita Murti, and we saw a few references regarding that, and also discussed the commentaries of Srila Jiva Goswami. Then we discussed the further aspects of Mangalachara, that's Guru Vandana, Vaishnava Vandana, and after that the Ashirvad or the benedictions that are expected by the author, which is Srila Rupa Goswami, and what benedictions he gives to all his readers. And the benediction is that by going through this work, by studying this work, one can attain pure devotional service, prema, love of Godhead. That's the Ashirvad. After that, we discussed about the Grantha Vibhaga, the divisions of this book itself. There are totally 51 chapters, and as you know, we are discussing the first 19 chapters, which forms the part of the Eastern Division. There are 4 divisions in this book. We are seeing only Eastern Division, which contains the first 19 chapters. We have completed our discussion on introduction, which includes his Mangalacharan prayers. And now, or rather, we are in the last portion of the introduction, which defines pure devotional service. This is the 11th and 12th verse. So before we start today's discussion, I just want to mention a couple of points. So if you see in my notes, there is, okay, I would suggest one thing is that when you're attending these classes, please have the book along with you, because these notes are distinct from the book such that the presentation is different. Okay, the same content which is there in Nectar of Devotion is also there in my notes, but I have also included the corresponding verses from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu and the translation of that as well, just for our understanding and for our reference. Okay, so that our study, the structure can be understood in a much better way, in a much proper way. So if you see, the shloka will be in this color along with the translation, for which the font size I have reduced so that it does not take much of our attention or focus. Because whatever this verses speak, the translation of this verse and the meaning of this verse is there in Srila Prabhupada's content. Okay, so Srila Prabhupada's content is in normal font, which is black in color. The main points or the considerable points I have highlighted in this maroon color with an underline. And the Acharya's commentary, when they come, then they are in this green color. Okay, so it's visible, right? So this will be in green color. So the content which is there in the book is this. Okay, so it's black in color. Everything else is just for our study purposes, for our references. Okay, so and for the exam, for the test, we'll be asking questions only from Prabhupada's content. Okay, nothing else will come from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Of course, there are some verses which we have to memorize. Okay, I'll tell you which verses to memorize. This verse definitely has to be memorized, Anyabhiyashita Shunyam. Okay, and yeah, you can anticipate that this question will most probably come in the exam also. Okay, so be very clear with this verse and the corresponding explanation that Srila Prabhupada gives. I will not be asking this translation if I ask this question. You don't have to write this translation, but you will have to write what Srila Prabhupada writes in Nectar of Devotion corresponding to this particular verse. Okay. So this is how it's going to be. So please do not get confused, that because our discussion will be interspersed, as I told yesterday. Our discussion will have the verses, if required, the translation, some points from the translation, then Prabhupada's explanation. Prabhupada's explanation will be in paragraph format, but then there are points. There are specific steps which I have made, points for clarity. And then there's Acharya's commentaries also, which will be interspersed. So like This is one big section. If you see in the book, in introduction, first class devotional service is known by one's tendency to be fully engaged in Krishna consciousness, serving the Lord favorably. The paragraph starts with a sentence. Okay. And then this paragraph is explained like this. Then the corresponding commentary from Acharyas is there. Jiva Goswami's commentary or Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary is here. After which the second paragraph comes. Okay, this devotional service sort of cultivation, and it's about a specific topic. So like this it comes, and then there is the commentary of the Acharyas. And after that, again, Srila Prabhupada's summary is there. His paragraph comes. And then again we have Jiva Goswami's commentary. So this has been done not for confusing all of you, but just to understand the subject matter more clearly. So this way, after this class, if you go and read the book, you should be able to relate what the Acharyas are speaking about this, and subject matter should be quite clear. And one more thing is that Srila Prabhupada did not use any Sanskrit terms in his translation. Sometimes here and there he has used, but not much. Okay, he uses Anushilanam, but like just for an example, he uses Anushilanam and other things. But while reading, if you think that the Sanskrit terms would help you in better understanding the subject matter, please have a notebook alongside and make a note with the corresponding page number and paragraph number. Okay, so that's why I'm telling this because these notes are a bit distinct or different from what you see in the book. So for preparing for your exams, if you have your corresponding notes along with you, it will be very easy to refer to, relate to, and understand the subject matter and write in your test. And also it will help in our personal study as well, which is actually the main intent of this course itself, that there should be some personal transformation with what we are discussing now. Exam is just a secondary aspect which allows us to judge or allows us to basically understand how much we have understood the subject matter. That's all. So test is actually secondary. The main goal is that we understand the subject matter and implement it in our life. Okay, so having said this, we will get into today's verse. So my plan would be to complete the introduction part, that is the 11th verse and 12th verse. So we'll finish the introduction today and also get into chapter 1. So today we'll start chapter 1 as well, and we will see how much we can go into that. And tomorrow we'll be completing with chapter 1. So if you see, we'll finish for this first week, which is 5 days. We have done only the preface, introduction, and chapter 1. Okay, but next week will be, and if you see, there are 19 chapters, and we have only 2 more weeks to complete them. So we have 19 chapters, 2 weeks. So major portion of the content of Nectar of Devotion for this exam we will be covering next week, which will be from chapter 2 to most probably chapter 11 or 12, or maybe 13 also. So which means we'll be discussing around 11 or 12 chapters. So why I'm telling this? Because this weekend or whenever, or rather you have to take out time to start studying this. We will not be able to see the commentaries of the Acharyas for all the 64 limbs of devotional service. Only specific items which are very important for our own personal practice we'll be discussing a little bit here. But apart from that, we'll just go through the flow. Okay, and some main points I'll highlight here and there, but then the study has to be done from your side. And third week, I want to spend some time on discussing this Raganuga Bhakti, Bhava Bhakti and Prema Bhakti, because this is a subject matter which is not normally understood in a detailed manner. Sadhana Bhakti is something which we are practicing in our life currently. Okay, so that's easier to relate to. But Bhava Bhakti, Prema Bhakti is something which we are aspiring for, but it's not relatable to us at this point of time. Even Raganuga Sadhana for that matter. So we will spend some time for that. So that's why next week I'm going to push a bit faster. So this is just a precursor, or I can say just a warning if you want to take, that please start reading now itself. Don't keep it till the end, because totally there are around 150 to 160 pages which we have to read for the test. Okay, and major portion of those 150 pages will be covering next week. So you please start reading from now itself, and then it will be easier for you to understand the subject matter and prepare for the test as well. Right. Okay. So yesterday we read this paragraph, Anyabhilashita Shunyam, Jnana Karma Dhyanavritam, Anukulyana Krishna Anushilanam, Bhakti Uttama. So this is first class devotional service, is known by one's tendency to be fully engaged in Krishna consciousness, serving the Lord favorably. So the purport is that one may be in Krishna consciousness unfavorably also. So we will discuss that. But that cannot be counted as pure devotional service. So Krishna consciousness should be favorable for the Lord. Because what is the purpose of devotional service? It's to please Krishna. Correct? Any activity that we do in devotional service, it is for pleasing Krishna. But if it's not pleasing Krishna, it's unfavorable to him, then how can it be counted as devotional service? So bhakti itself means that it should be for the pleasure of Krishna. It should not be for the pleasure of anybody else, even for us for that matter. It should be for the pleasure of the spiritual master and through him to the Supreme Lord, to Krishna. So therefore, unfavorable devotional service is not counted, or rather, unfavorable Krishna consciousness is not counted as pure devotional service. So we also see there is an intricate difference between Krishna consciousness and pure devotional service. Okay, although in Srila Prabhupada's writing, Krishna consciousness is used as on the par or as synonym of pure devotional service, but devotional service itself means that it's favorable to Krishna. One can be Krishna conscious and not be devotee of the Lord also, as we have seen the example of Shishupal or Kamsa. They're fully Krishna conscious, but they were not considered as devotees because it's not favorable. Pure devotional service should be free from the desire for any material benefit or for sense gratification, as these desires are cultivated through fruitive activities and philosophical speculation. So this is Anyabhilashita Shunyam Jnana Karma Dhanavartam. People are engaged in different activities to get some material profit, while philosophers are engaged in proposing transcendental realization through volumes of word jugglery and speculation. So this is jnana and karma. Different activities to get some material profit is your karma. And this is jnana, philosophers engaging in transcendental realization. This is jnana. So this should be jnana karma anavritam. It should always be free, must always be free. So must is used. No, there's no pure devotional service means it should be free from karma and jnana and from any other desires. There's no compromise. One has to learn Krishna consciousness from authorities by spontaneous loving service. So we discussed this yesterday. Now, in this connection, Srila Jiva Goswami, he writes, in the first wave of Eastern division, first of all, the characteristics of Uttama Bhakti or pure Bhakti will be dealt with. If you remember, yesterday we discussed that in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, we will not be discussing about mixed devotional service. There is no Karma Yoga, there is no Jnana Yoga, no Karma Mishra Bhakti, no Jnana Mishra Bhakti, or Ashtanga Yoga Mishra Bhakti, nothing. It's only talking about pure devotional service. And the limbs which are mentioned, the 64 angas of devotional service are also for pure devotional service. And the characteristics which we'll be discussing in chapter 1, that is also with respect to pure devotional service only. Okay. Mixed devotional service will not exhibit or manifest the characteristics of pure devotional service. If you have read Nectar of Devotion, there are 6 characteristics totally which we'll be discussing in chapter 1, which will be Kleshagni, Shubhada, Sudurlabha, then Moksha Laghutakrit, Sadhanananda Vishetatma, and Krishna Akarshidi. These are the 6 characters. We'll discuss this in detail. These 6 will not manifest completely in case of mixed devotional service. This will manifest only in case of pure devotional service. So this thing we should remember very clearly. Uttama Bhakti means pure devotional service. No mixed devotional service has been discussed here. The whole of bhakti will not be discussed, means the different aspects of bhakti, like as we discussed, karma mishra bhakti, jnana mishra bhakti will not be discussed here. Only uttama bhakti or pure devotional service is discussed. The reason is given. This is in order to describe clearly the supreme position of bhakti. When bhakti is not pure and is covered by other desires in the form of jnana and karma, its strength is not full. Means these characteristics are not manifest, and it will not take one. Mixed devotional service cannot take one to bhava and prema. Okay, so that should be very clear. Uttama Bhakti can only take to Bhava and Prema. Mixed devotional service will not take to Bhava and Prema. It might help in some amount of purification of the senses. Okay, but beyond that, one must take up to pure devotional service. One cannot situate himself only in Karma Mishra Bhakti or Jnana Mishra Bhakti for throughout and think that he can attain the prime destination. That's not possible. It doesn't work like that. So the characteristics appear only properly. Only partially. Thus, mixed bhakti cannot be used to show the supreme nature of bhakti. This is understood from the following verse. Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavate kinchana sarvair gunai satta samasate suraha harava bhaktasya kuto mahadguna manorathena asati dhavato bahihi. So in this verse, this is a famous verse. We all know about this. So yasyasti bhaktir bhagavate kinchana. So it's bhakti which is akinchana. Okay, it is not mixed. Sarvair gunays tatra samasita sura. So one who engages a pure devotional service, all characteristics or good qualities of pure devotional service are manifest in in the personality of the devotee. Mixed devotional service also, and here you see Harava Bhakta se kuto Mahatguna, Manorathe Nasati Dhavato Bahihi. Manoratha means the chariot of the mind. So mixed devotional service, there is some dependence on one's mind with respect to enjoying this material world or with respect to having some philosophical speculation, trying to understand the absolute truth by one's own endeavor. So that is also categorized under Manoratha. So those who are in this Manoratha, the transcendental qualities of pure devotional service, the characteristics of pure devotional service do not manifest properly. So therefore Jiva Goswami gives this particular verse saying, all transcendental qualities are manifested only when one engages in pure devotional service. So, and we also discussed yesterday that there are two, this whole verse can be divided into two categories, which is Swarupa Lakshana and Tatastha Lakshana. Swarupa Lakshana is Anukulena Krishnanu Shilanam, and Tatastha Lakshana is Anyabhilashita Shunyam Jnana Karma Denavritam. So Anyabhilashita Shunyam is one characteristic, and that is one Lakshana, Tatastha Lakshana or Gauna Lakshana, and Jnana Karma Denavritam. So one can be Anyabhilashita Shunyam, he will not have any desires, and he may be free from Jnana and Karma also, but that does not mean that he is engaged in devotional service. So therefore it's a secondary characteristic. But Swarupa Lakshana, the actual Swarupa of devotional service is one who is Anukula, who is favorably engaged or disposed towards Krishna, and he engages in continuous devotional service under the authority of the spiritual master and the acharyas. So that is Anukulyana Krishnanu Shilanam. So therefore it's the primary characteristic of devotional service, whereas the other two, Anyabhilashata Jnana Karma Denavartam, are secondary characteristic. Okay. So Krishnanu Shilanam, Srila Prabhupada explains that devotional service is a sort of cultivation. So it is something for which we have to endeavor. This is what it means. Okay, sort of cultivation means just like we cultivate crops. Means we have so much endeavor has to be made. The ground has to be tilled, it has to be prepared. Then the seeds have to be sown. Then it has to be tended to. The watering has to be done properly. Then proper fertilization of the crops should be done. The weeds should be removed. So there is a process which is required for the crops to come up, correct? So that is cultivation. So devotional service is also like cultivation, where we have to be alert each and every moment of how we are progressing or what we are doing in our practical devotional life. So therefore it's a cultivation, and which basically means that we have to actively endeavor for it. Devotional service means activity. It does not mean inactivity. Right? It is not simply inaction for people who like to be inactive or devote their time to silent meditation. There are many different methods for people who want this, but cultivation of Krishna consciousness is different. The particular word used by Srila Rupa Goswami in this connection is Anushilana, or cultivation by following the predecessor teachers, acharyas. So there are two meanings to this word Anu. It can be following the acharyas, as Srila Prabhupada says here. And the acharyas comment that Anu also means to continuously engage in devotional service. Anushilanam means always endeavoring, continuously endeavoring each and every moment for devotional service, rendering service to the Lord. So it has both these meanings. And as soon as we say cultivation, we must refer to activity. Without activity, consciousness alone cannot help us. All activities may be divided into two classes, it says. One class may be for achieving a certain goal, and other may be for avoiding some unfavorable circumstances. So activities are categorized into these two. Right? One is to achieving anukulyasya sankalpam, pratikulyasya varjanam. Right? The first two aspects of surrender to the Lord is anukulyasya sankalpam. That which is anukul for bhakti, that should be taken care of. Okay, that should be done. And what is pratikul to bhakti, pratikulyasya varjanam, that should be given up. So there are some things we should do and some things that we should not do. And it's primarily in our Krishna consciousness movement, it is we should chant 16 rounds every day. That's your favorable activity. And that which should not be done, that is you're following these four regulative principles in a basic way to understand this. Srila Prabhupada continues, in Sanskrit these activities are called pravritti and nivritti, which is positive and negative action. There are many examples of negative action. For instance, a diseased person has to be cautious and take medicine in order to avoid some unfavorable illness. Right? So he's performing an activity by taking that medicine, but it is to avoid something which is unfavorable to him. So Srila Jiva Goswami in this connection says the signification of the verbal root shil, right? It's anu shilanam. So the dhatu is shil dhatu. It is twofold. Pravrityatmaka, expressing action, to worship, practice, and serve, and Nivrityatmaka, expressing non-action, to be intensely absorbed. Okay. So thus Anushilanam or continuous service has an active form, Cheshta Rupa, using the body, mind and words, and an emotional form, Bhava Rupa, consisting of affection, Preeti and despair, Vishada, of the mind. Right. So this is a different perspective that Srila Jiva Goswami gives, and I included it here because this definition will be helpful when we come to understanding Bhava Bhakti. Okay, these two terms, Cheshta Rupa and Bhava Rupa. This is something that we should understand now because these two terms will be used in 17th chapter when we are discussing Bhava Bhakti, or when we start with Bhava Bhakti. The first verse of 17th chapter itself is speaking about this. So Cheshta Rupa means where there is an active form or where there is an active endeavor through the gross body and the subtle body, which is manifested through this body, mind and words. So Anushilanam, if you see, what's the definition that Srila Prabhupada gives for Anushilanam? Devotional service is cultivation. So one can cultivate devotional service through his body, mind and words. Okay. But as one progresses through sadhana bhakti, then there is an effective part also. There is a part where Anushilanam continues in one's emotions. Or how it goes is, we have sadhana bhakti, and then by performing sadhana bhakti, one comes to the stage of bhava bhakti, and then finally to the stage of prema bhakti. Okay, so this is the basic understanding. So by performing sadhana bhakti, one attains bhava bhakti. And bhava bhakti, the devotion itself is it's spontaneous devotion. Spontaneous devotion is emotions are involved at that time. So there might not be an active form expressed through body, mind and words, but the emotions are so intense. The love and affection for Krishna is so intense. So therefore Anushilanam is categorized into these two. So Pravrityatmaka means that which is expressed through body, mind and words, and Nivrityatmaka is that which is driven by intense emotions. Now our devotional service, or those of us who are in the stage of sadhana bhakti, we are not driven by emotions. We are driven by rules and regulations given to us by the spiritual master, by the guru. So there are some things, we being conditioned soul, I'm speaking in a general way, not specifically about anyone, but generally speaking, those of us who are on the stage of sadhana bhakti, we have to push ourselves. It's an active endeavor, and our push is not coming because of intense affection or love for Krishna. Obviously, those of us who have been in devotional service for some time, okay, we do have some affection for Krishna. We cannot say that affection is not there at all. It's there, but then it's not completely manifest. It's not fully manifest at this point of time. So some affection is there, but then still we have to push ourselves. And this we can understand. There are things that we should do every day, getting for Mangalarti, chanting during the japa time, and attending all the artis, kirtans during the time, service. So when we have to do this day in, day out, and then there is a drag that is also there. Correct? And sometimes we have to push ourselves to get up early in the morning, to attend Mangalarti and do things like that. So that we can understand in our own life that how we are doing. So this is sadhana bhakti, where rules and regulations are more prominent in our performance of devotional service than the intense affection and love for Krishna. That's not the driving factor. So this is called as Cheshta Rupa, where you are making Cheshta, there's an effort is being made to render devotional service. And then there is Bhava Rupa. So Jiva Goswami categorizes this into two. Pravrityatmaka means Cheshta Rupa, Nivrityatmaka means Bhava Rupa. And how does Srila Prabhupada say? He says we have to, Pravriti means we have to do that which is favorable, and Nivriti that we have to do which is not favorable. Okay, so just it's a two different perspective, and both are applicable in our definition of pure devotional service. So we should not think that the acharyas are not in line. It's just two different perspectives which they are giving, but it gives a very wholesome or complete understanding of what pure devotional service is, or what Anushilanam is in this particular context. Correct? So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur also comments in a similar way. So just move forward. Those who are cultivating spiritual life and executing devotional service are always engaged in activity. Such activity can be performed with the body or with the mind. Thinking, feeling, willing are the activities of the mind. And when we will to do something, the activity comes to be manifest by the gross bodily senses. So first we contemplate, then we have some attraction to contemplate to do a particular activity, then we have attraction to that particular activity, and then finally we do that activity. Right? So there are the stages. So all the activities are manifest from the subtle body to the gross body. There's a desire, and then those desires are fulfilled. Correct? So there's a desire to enjoy the senses. Now we're speaking philosophically, there's a desire to enjoy the senses. Okay, and the senses are grouped around the mind. And mind's function is thinking, feeling, and willing. So when the senses want to interact with the corresponding sense objects, which means when our senses in our body want to enjoy some pleasure by coming in contact with the objects of this material world, then first point is the thinking process, where one sees that corresponding material object and then he starts contemplating on it. And then he feels regarding it, oh, if I get this, then I'll attain happiness. It'll be so nice. It'll be so comfortable, or whatever it may be. And after that, then he decides to engage in that particular activity, that is willing. And then when he decides to do that particular activity, then it's manifested in the gross working senses of this body doing that particular activity. So where does the problem start? It starts with, when speaking from the materialistic point of view, it starts from the mind. That's why the mind should be controlled. And Krishna says that, no, that udhret atmanatmanam natmanam avasadhyet. Atmaiva atmano bandhur atmaiva ripuratmanaha. The mind is the friend as well as the enemy. Because our materialistic activities, it start from this particular process, contemplating about the sense objects. In Bhagavad-Gita again, Krishna says, no, one who starts contemplating on the sense objects, then he gets entangled into that. Then lust develops. This from 2.62 onwards, it's mentioned. So thinking, feeling, and willing are activities of the mind. So we discussed this with respect to the material sense gratification that normally people engage in. But the same thinking, feeling, and willing can also be engaged or must be engaged in Krishna consciousness. And how that should be done is what Srila Prabhupada will discuss here. So he says that, when we will to do something, that is when the activity or when the contemplation is complete in the mind, the activity comes to be manifest by the gross bodily senses. So working senses then perform that activity. Thus in our material activities, we should always try to think of Krishna and try to plan how to please him. Sorry, not material activities, mental activities. In our mental activities, we should always try to think of Krishna and try to plan how to please him, following in the footsteps of the great acharyas and the personal spiritual master. So you see this? This is personal spiritual master. So now this defeats the idea of Ritvikism. Because Srila Prabhupada is very clear here that one must have his own personal spiritual master. And why that is required is also practical to understand. Because when one takes up to Krishna consciousness or takes up to devotional service, then this material world itself is an ocean of problems. It's an ocean of contradictions and confusions. And in Kali Yuga specifically, the living entity is always Vipadrutaha. It's always disturbed with so many other things. So even in performance of devotional service also, there are so many challenges that might come up. Therefore, personal guidance is required. And one who gives personal guidance for one's devotional service, he is a spiritual master. So therefore, this whole concept of Ritvik, where one goes back to the previous acharyas and take initiation from that acharya and thinks that without his guidance, one can perform devotional service, he is just deluding himself. He is an illusion. And he cannot understand or he cannot find whether the progress, whether he's making any progress at all, and if whatever progress is making, whether it's in the right direction or not. So there's a constant supervision that is required. Just like child, when a child has to walk, when a child has to learn, then the parents are constantly supervising what the child is doing so that he does not fall down, so that he does not keep anything which should not be kept inside the mouth. Like that, correct? So we are all children in our spiritual life. So therefore, the spiritual master, who's like a father, he should, we have to be under his shelter. That's the point. So therefore, personal spiritual master is required. So this completely defeats the whole concept of Ritvikism. Anyway, it's a side point, so we'll continue with our discussion on pure devotional service. There are activities of the body, activities of the mind, and activities of speech. A Krishna conscious person engages his words in preaching the glories of the Lord, and this is called Kirtan. So there is activities of the mind, body, and words. So first, Srila Prabhupada gives about the activities of speech. And he says that one who engages his words in preaching the glories of the Lord, then he is doing Kirtan. So this is also an important point for us to understand that Kirtan means it's for the pleasure of Krishna. It's for glorification of Krishna. Nowadays, there are so many kirtans which are being done only for the pleasure of our senses, for the pleasure of our ears. If there are lots of musical instruments, then it's considered as very nice kirtan, very good kirtan like this. But kirtan is specifically meant for the glorification of the Lord. Anyway, we'll not discuss this topic most or a lot because we have further things to discuss. But it's just a point that we should be very clear on that kirtan is specifically meant only for the glorification of the Lord. And whenever we are singing in kirtan, that should be our attitude, that should be for the mood, that should be our mood, that in this body, whatever qualities have been given to me, and what are those qualities? We can use these senses for satisfaction of Lord. There is a tendency to speak, tendency to sing. So that potency is given to us by Krishna only. So we should engage that potency in Krishna's service. So therefore, in Kirtan, I'm engaging what has been given to me by Krishna in serving Krishna. Like this. So each and every activity specific to Kirtan is what we are speaking. But throughout whole life, whatever senses, the potency of the senses comes from Lord only. He's the master of the senses. He's Hrishikesha. Hrishikesha means being the master of the senses, he gives the potency for the senses to act. So therefore, all our senses should be engaged in his service only. So this potency should be engaged in serving the potent. The energy should be used for serving the energetic. Correct? These are the philosophical points which we have been discussing throughout this Bhakti Shastra course. And that is how we practically implement it. So this is called Kirtan. And it's not only singing, but also speaking. Speaking about Krishna conscious topics is also called as Kirtan, right? Engaging his words. Srila Prabhupada says, words means speaking, not only singing. So that is also Kirtan. And famously, Srila Prabhupada always used to quote his spiritual master, Siddhanta Saraswati. He said that does not matter whether you have an audience to speak or not. Even if there is no audience, then you can speak to the walls. Siddhanta Saraswati's disciples used to go out to preach. Actually, Siddhanta Saraswati made so many sannyasis and brahmacharis. His Gresa disciples were also there, but the major push was from the sannyasis and the brahmacharis. So they used to go throughout whole of India and preached. But many times what happened is the brahmacharis used to come back to Siddhanta Saraswati and say, today we tried to preach, but nobody came in our lecture session. Or when we tried to distribute some pamphlets or magazine like Sajjan Toshani or Gaudiya magazine or Harmonist, then only 1 or 2 people took. Everybody rejected it. But Siddhanta Saraswati, what did he say? He said, do not get dejected, because the whole idea of preaching is for the pleasure of Krishna. We are supposed to engage our body, mind and words for the pleasure of Krishna. So even if nobody comes, you should not be dejected, because from your point of view, you have tried to glorify Krishna. So preaching means the effect of preaching or the result of preaching is definitely many people come and join this Krishna conscious movement, take up the devotional service. That is there. But then that's not a result of our active endeavor. Our effort or our mood should be that we are doing it for the pleasure of Krishna. The result is in Krishna's hands. So we just have to become an instrument. Nimitta matra bhava save sachin, Krishna says to Arjuna, right? You just have to be instrument. Everything else will be taken care of by me. So we have to be instruments in the hands of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We have to be the instruments in the hands of Srila Prabhupada, and everything else will be taken care of by them. So this whole concept of maintaining purity in devotional service, of speaking the message clearly as it is so important, because that is what gives result. Anything else which might look like result is actually not result, because people will not be able to take up pure devotional service. Therefore, the message is that is being propagated, or rather what we should speak through our words should be only about pure devotional service. It should not be anything else. And the results are in the hands of Krishna, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Acharyas and the spiritual master. So they will give the results. So we don't have to run after the results. We just have to do service to them. So that's why Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati used to say, even if there's nobody to preach, you preach to the walls. You preach to the walls, and then the walls will hear. Therefore, that way glorification of Krishna is accomplished. That is your main task. Glorification of Krishna is your main task through your words. Not preaching, not making so many members and things like that. So just one note in this connection. It is from, are you able to see this? It is visible? Yes. So this is from, what is that book? It's from Hayagriva Prabhu, Hare Krishna Explosion. Okay, so there he writes, he's quoting Srila Prabhupada, and he says, I wrote the introduction one night last February when I was alone. So this is Srila Prabhupada speaking to Hayagriva. So I wrote the introduction. This is to introduction to Bhagavad-Gita. One night, last February, when I was alone, he tells me, I was just sitting in my apartment and had no one to talk to. And I remembered my spiritual master saying, if there is only one person present, that is all right. Preach to him about Krishna. And if no one is present, you can preach to the walls. So I was preaching to the walls, but I had this tape recorder. And what I spoke can now be heard by you. That was the introduction to this Bhagavad Gita. Right? So he preached to the walls, but then he also utilized this tape recorder. Tape recorder is a material object. There's no active person listening to Krishna consciousness. But you see, Prabhupada, even while writing his purports, or while dictating his purport to Srimad Bhagavatam, he was doing it all alone. Nobody was there in front of him. But see how many devotees it has made, how many books have been distributed, and how wonderful this whole movement has been created just by such kind of preaching. So it does not mean that we must have an audience. Just preach, even preach to the walls, and then that will have its effect. Okay, so that is possible. So moving forward, we have to... Yes. And by his mind, a Krishna conscious person always thinks of the activities of the Lord as he's speaking on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, or engaging in his various pastimes in Vrindavan and his devotees. So we discussed yesterday again that Krishna conscious person always thinks of the activities of the Lord, and there is no distinction between the activities of the Lord in Kurukshetra or activities of the Lord in Vrindavan or Mathura along with his devotees. They are all on the same absolute plane. In this way, one can always think of the activities and pastimes of the Lord. This is the mental culture of Krishna consciousness. Similarly, from bodily activities also, many services can be offered. But all such activities must be in relationship with Krishna. This relationship is established by connecting oneself with the bona fide spiritual master. You see, when he's referring to bodily activities, the first thing that one should do is approach the spiritual master. A physical spiritual master, approach him and take instructions from him. Tad vidhi pranipatena, pariprashnena sevaya, upadekshanti te jnanam, jnana sattvatarshina. You have to go to a spiritual master. Not that we imagine that we are taking initiation from Srila Prabhupada. It's not like that. We have to physically go to the spiritual master and then ask for an inquiry from him. Athata Brahma Jigyasa, inquiry should be there. Sadharma Pricha. You have to ask about the eternal religious principles from him. And then take his shelter, take Diksha from him. So that is important. Therefore, the execution of Krishna conscious activities with the body should be directed by the spiritual master and then performed with faith. So both things should be there. It should be directed by the spiritual master and then those activities should be performed with faith. It is said in the Shastras that activities not specifically relating to devotional service, but those activities which are the ritualistic activities or the karmakanda portion of the Vedic literatures, those activities, if they are performed without faith in them, they will not give the result. So this is the Vedic understanding. Any activity or Vedic ritualistic performance also, if we have to do, we must have faith that what we are doing is according to the Vedas, what we are doing is perfect, and we will get the corresponding result from that. If we do not have faith in that, then it will not give proper result. Okay, this is from the mundane point of view. But from devotional point of view, if we have to make rapid progress in devotional service, from the level of sadhana bhakti to bhava bhakti and prema bhakti, faith should be there. That's why ado shraddha, then tatha sadhu sangha. You know this verse, right? It's also from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu only, but it's in a different division. We'll not be discussing this in Eastern way, but these are the 9 steps of pure devotional service. Ado shraddha, tatha sadhu sangha, atha bhajana kriya, anartha nivritti syat, then nishtha, then ruchi, then asakti, then bhava, then prema. These are the stages of devotional service. But it starts with shraddha, it starts with faith. And one who has faith, then he takes shelter of, then he starts associating with devotees. Sadhu sangha, then bhajana kriya, then he engages in devotional service. And then he takes shelter of the spiritual master, take initiation from him, and then anartha nivritti starts. And anartha nivritti is like the big ocean that we have to cross. So once anartha nivritti is crossed, then it's ruchi, it's nishtha, ruchi, asakti, bhava, and prema. All these things come karbenaiva, just like in a sequence they come. When one crosses anartha nivritti, then other things come automatically in due course of time. But the starting point is shraddha. And acharyas explain that for each of these stages, sadhu sangha, bhajana kriya, anartha nivritti, shraddha should be included. So it's not that shraddha, we start with shraddha and then we give it up when we come to bhajana kriya or anartha nivritti. No, the intensity of faith in this transcendental process of Krishna consciousness, it increases as we progress in devotional service. So therefore, one who is on the level of nishtha, ruchi, and asakti, he has much more faith and understanding than one who has just started in devotional service, shraddha and bhajana and sadhu sangha. So it's like this. So shraddha should not be given up. So therefore, to attain the stage of bhava and prema, the faith must be there in whatever activities we perform with respect to Krishna consciousness. So these activities should be directed by the spiritual master and then performed with faith. The connection with the spiritual master is called initiation. From the date of initiation by the spiritual master, the connection between Krishna and a person cultivating Krishna consciousness is established. Without initiation by a bona fide spiritual master, the actual connection with Krishna consciousness is never performed. Okay, so this is also very important to understand. Without diksha, without initiation by the bona fide spiritual master, connection, actual connection, factual connection with Krishna consciousness is never performed, it's never established. You might have encountered devotees who are associated with Krishna consciousness movement for 15, 20 years. When I was in US, I know those devotees used to come for everyday programs, morning Mangalarti, this and all, and then every Sunday program also they used to be there, but they never took initiation. And there are also famous kirtaniyas in our ISKCON movement itself, who are so famous that all the great, wherever there are programs, they go there, do also kirtan and all, but then they are not initiated by anybody. Okay, so what is the point? The point is that unless one is initiated, unless one takes shelter of the spiritual master, the real actual connection with Krishna consciousness, actual connection with holy name is never performed. So because taking shelter of the spiritual master means one brings himself down to a humble position. He takes shelter of the spiritual master means he's ready to become a menial servant, a humble servant of the Guru and render service to Krishna through one spiritual master. Okay, and there are devotees also who think, no spiritual master. Why a human being I should take shelter of? I'll directly take shelter of Krishna. It's Krishna and me. Nobody in between. All these things will not work. Okay. If Krishna says, Acharya mam vijaniya nava manihana karichit, tad vidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevya. He does not say, if you want to learn Krishna consciousness, want to learn the philosophy, directly come to me. He says, go to a jnani, one who knows this tattva. Tad vidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevya. Upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshinaha. He does not say, I am the tattvadarshi, you ask everything from me. No. He says, you must go to a spiritual master. Then he will instruct you about this. And the spiritual master is not different from me. Acharya mam vijaniya nava manihe karichit. Sarvadeva mayo guruhu. He says, Acharya is not different from me. He says. So this is Krishna's process that one must take to devotional service. Through the spiritual master. One must take initiation from the spiritual master. And then that actual connection with Krishna consciousness is established that way. So one must come to that stage. That stage must be gone through. One cannot approach Krishna directly. Krishna can be approached only through his devotees. So these are important points. Although we are speaking about the definition of pure devotional service, Srila Prabhupada has included so many of these statements like this, where everything becomes very clear. Ritvigism does not work properly, and kirtan means engaging in words and preaching the glories of the Lord. This is how kirtan should be done. Kirtan, even if nobody is there to hear, we must do kirtan. We should always think of the activities of the Lord in the battle of Kurukshetra as well as in Vrindavan also, because there is no difference between these two. So many points can be gathered from his definition. So that's why study of Prabhupada's books is like this. Each and every line gives so many meanings. So, it's relishable. It's very nice. Okay. So continuing, this is Srila Jiva Goswami commenting. And he says that Anushilanam means service for persons related to Krishna or service for Krishna directly. That is the meaning of Krishna Anushilanam. Right? We have been seeing what Anushilanam means. Anushilanam means following the spiritual master, following the authorities, and then performing the activities of pure devotional service. That is Anushilanam. But Anushilanam means that it is, or Krishna Anushilanam means it must be done only for Krishna. It must not be done or serving my family. Serving the nation is pure devotional service. Manav Seva is Madhav Seva. No. Mana Seva is not Madhav Seva, because Mana Seva is not included in the definition of pure devotional service. Right? Anyway, we'll read this. That's the meaning of Krishna Anushilanam, because this definition also includes persons related to Krishna as well as Krishna himself. It avoids the fault of being too narrow. Thus, angas of bhakti, such as taking shelter of Guru's lotus feet, may be included in bhakti even in Bhava Rupa Anushilanam. At the stage of Bhava, Sthayi Bhavas and Vyabhichari Bhavas may be expressed in relation to Guru within this definition of bhakti. So Krishna Anushilanam also means taking shelter of Krishna as well as Krishna's pure devotees. So therefore, Krishna Anushilanam includes devotional service for Krishna and also serving the spiritual master and serving the acharyas. So Krishna means Krishna and his expansions. Srila Prabhupada speaks about this actually. This cultivation of Krishna consciousness is not material. The Lord has three general energies, namely external, internal, and marginal. Living entities are marginal energy. The cosmic manifestation is an action of material energy. Spiritual world is a manifestation of internal energy. And the living entities, they perform material activities under the influence of external energy, and they engage in activities of Krishna consciousness under the internal or spiritual energy. So Krishna conscious activities come under the spiritual energy of the Lord. Right? Mahatmanas Maham Partha, Daivim Prakritim Ashritaha. Those who are great devotees of the Lord, they take shelter. Or those are devotees of the Lord. The Mahatmas, they take shelter of the Daivi Prakriti, of the spiritual nature of the Lord. And he also says that Daivi Hesha Gunamayi, Mama Maya Durateya. So both are transcendental, both are energies of the Lord. But this energy is very difficult to overcome. Daivi Hesha Gunamayi, Mama Maya Durateya. So that is the external energy of the Lord. To come out of the external energy, one must take shelter of the internal energy. So those activities which are done under shelter of internal energy or the spiritual energy of the Lord is called as Krishna consciousness. So Krishna Anushilanam means this. Activities must be performed by taking shelter of the internal potency of the Lord. This means that those who are great souls, so this is the transition which we discussed now, they act under the protection of the spiritual energy. Activities done in devotional service are directly under the control of spiritual energy. In other words, energy is a sort of strength, and this strength can be spiritualized by the mercy of both the bona fide spiritual master and Krishna. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, Lord Chaitanya states, it's fortunate person who comes in contact with the bona fide spiritual master by the grace of Krishna. Right? Brahmande Brahmite Konu Bhagyavan Jeev, Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. So one who has the mercy of both Guru as well as Krishna, he gets the seed of pure devotional service. So this also suggests to the fact that only Krishna and no Guru will not give the seed of pure devotional service. No Krishna, Guru Kripahi Kevalam, only the Guru also will not give the seed of pure devotional service. Both should be there. Affection for Krishna, affection for spiritual master. Service mood, service attitude for the spiritual master as well as for Krishna. That is the proper definition of pure devotional service. That's why Krishna Anushilanam. Here Krishna means Krishna as well as his pure devotees. One who is serious about spiritual life is given by Krishna the intelligence to come into contact with bona fide spiritual master, and then by the grace of the spiritual master, one becomes advanced in Krishna consciousness. So whole jurisdiction is directly under spiritual energy, Krishna and spiritual master. This has nothing to do with the material world. You see, multiple times Prabhupada speaks about Krishna and spiritual master, Krishna and spiritual master. So this is what Krishna Anushilanam means. Then he expands. When we speak of Krishna, we refer to the Supreme Personality of Godhead along with his many expansions. He is expanded by his plenary parts and parcels. He is differentiated part and parcels. So Krishna, in other words, means everything and includes everything. Generally, however, we should understand Krishna to mean Krishna and his personal expansions like Baladev, Shankarshan, Vasudeva, Aniruddha, Pradyumna, Rama, Narsimha, Varaha, and as well as many other incarnations and innumerable Vishnu expansions. These are described in Srimad Bhagavatam. So Krishna includes all such expansions as well as his pure devotees. Right? And in Brahma Samhita it is stated Krishna's expansions are all complete in eternity, blissful and cognizance. Now, if you remember, while discussing about this Akhila Rasamrita Murti, we discussed that this Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, we'll be discussing primarily about devotional service to Krishna. But here, Srila Prabhupada writes that Krishna means Krishna as well as his expansions. About Narayana, Shankarshana, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, Vasudeva, Janardhana, like this, and also his pure devotees. So, from Rasa point of view, from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu's point of view, Akhila Rasamrita is indeed Krishna only. But pure devotional service can also be rendered to the expansions of the Lord. And this apparent contradiction is resolved by in the purport of Srila Prabhupada, which he wrote in 1960 in his Back to Godhead magazine for this particular verse. Right? He wrote the first 25. For first 25 verses, he did the translation and purport. For the 11th verse also he did. And most of the content which he wrote in 1960 is present in Nectar of Devotion. But this particular point, I just want to read from that Back to Godhead article itself. So Srila Prabhupada writes, the process of devotional service in the primary stage is the same as that of devotional service of Krishna or Vishnu or Narayana. Means it includes Krishna as well as his personal expansions. In the highest stages of service, there is different of rasa, which we have already discussed in the beginning of this translation. It means Akhila Rasamrita Murti. In the critical differentiation of rasa study, there is a specific transcendental difference of reciprocating a devotional service, but in essence, there is no difference between the service of Rama or Krishna. These particular differences will be taken up later on. So there is difference in terms of transcendental reciprocation between the Lord and his devotees. But from our point of view, devotional service, pure devotional service means to Krishna, to other forms, the expansions of Krishna, and it also includes the pure devotees of the Lord, means the spiritual master, the acharyas, and senior devotees. So that is also included within this definition of pure devotional service. Okay. Right. So Jiva Goswami, he says that Anushilanam, this service or Anushilanam is obtained only by the mercy of Krishna and his devotees. So this is what Srila Prabhupada also wrote, which is the Sarupa Shakti of the Lord, right? The internal potency of the Lord. Devotional service is performed under the internal potency of the Lord. In this verse, the word Krishna also indicates bhakti for other forms, because Krishna is Swayam Bhagwan, including all other forms of God, such as Narsimha. So Krishna and his expansions means all the expansions are already included within Krishna. So devotional service to Krishna means the other forms of Lord also are included within him. Then the next verse. So we have seen two aspects of pure devotional service, which is Krishna Anushilanam, Krishna and Anushilanam. Then we get into this Anukulya, means it's favorable. Devotional service means it must be favorable to Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada writes, devotional service means to prosecute Krishna conscious activities which are favorable to the transcendental pleasure of the Supreme Lord, Krishna. And any activities which are not favorable to the transcendental favor of the Lord cannot be accepted as devotional service. For example, great demons like Ravana, Kamsa and Hiranyakashipu were always thinking of Krishna, but they were thinking of him as their enemy. This sort of thinking cannot be accepted as bhakti or Krishna consciousness. Okay, so Prabhupada equates bhakti with Krishna consciousness, but they were also Krishna conscious. But then it's not Krishna consciousness. It's not devotional service. Okay. Then Jiva Goswami comments, the word Anukulya is the descriptive element of Anushilana, which means Anushilanam should be defined by this Anukul. So the activities which we are doing for Krishna, it should be favorable for Krishna. It is necessary in order to limit the definition of bhakti. The definition of bhakti cannot be established with a disagreeable attitude towards Krishna. So one may perform devotional service or the activities of devotional service, but with a grudge. Saying, oh, okay, somehow we are doing this. I don't want to do this, but somehow I'm doing this. There is no concept of the spiritual master, no concept of Krishna, but somehow, just like an animal performing some activities of devotional service. That is not the definition of pure devotional service. It must be done with an attitude of favorable, of Anukula. It should be Anukul to Krishna. The favorable attitude should be there, not with a grudging or angry mind. Sometimes if something does not work out, we become angry while performing our service. That's not favorable. Okay, that is not the concept. That's not pure devotional service. So these lower modes or the modes of passion and other things, which manifest automatically within us when we are performing service, we should curb them, because that is not favorable. And we will see that when we are seeing the different angas of devotional service, deity worship will come. And specifically it's mentioned that one should not shout in front of the deities at anyone. One should not become angry in front of the deities, because it's not favorable. It's not anukul. So these things we should remember, and then when we study the limbs of devotional service, everything will start making sense. This deity worship is just an example. So that's why in front of the deities, we do not speak to each other, and we do not do prajalpa or talking about mundane, general topics, social topics in front of the deities, because that's not favorable. Krishna is there, and our presence is here only to do service to him. So when we are in the temple, we should do service to the Lord. That should be the consciousness. Nothing else should be done. We are not actually supposed to speak about mundane topics within the temple hall. It's not done. That is not devotional service. So all those things should be outside. So in front of the deities, there are some rules and regulations which have to be followed. But a person who has transcended these rules and regulations, who's into Raganuga Bhakti or Bhava Bhakti, Prema Bhakti, automatically he has no other consciousness but to serve the Lord when he's in front of the deities. So for him, it is spontaneous. But for us, it is rules and regulations. This must be done, this must not be done. This is pravritti, this is nivritti. Like this. Okay? So it should be favorable to the Lord. The word anukulena in conjunction with Krishna Shilam means behavior pleasing for Krishna, right? Anu is added to Shilanam, indicates the service should be continuous. Anukulena Krishna Shilanam is continuous service or emotions directed towards Krishna. So this is the definition of pure devotional service. His expansions towards for Krishna, his expansion forms and other related to him with a pleasing attitude towards Krishna. This is the essential characteristic of bhakti. See, Swarupa Lakshana. This is Swarupa Lakshana. Anukulena Krishna Shilanam. Then, Srila Vishwanath Chakri Thakur, he gives much or other, some more details regarding this. So he says the definition of Anukulya as pleasing for Krishna is both too extensive and too limiting. For instance, the action Anushilanam of a demon attacking Krishna is the rasa of fighting, Yuddha Veera rasa, derived from Utsaharati, from Krishna's perspective. What does it mean? It means that Krishna takes pleasure in fighting with the demons. Correct? So it's favorable to Krishna. Krishna is fighting with the demons, it's favorable to Krishna. And the demon is also always thinking about Krishna and is also engaged in active endeavor for pleasing Krishna. So can the demon be considered as a devotee? No. He is demon. No, he is not a devotee. But then he fits into the description of Anukulena Krishna Shilanam. Right? Whatever he is doing, say for example, this Jaya Vijay, they came as Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. And when the Lord came as Varahadev, or when the Lord came as Nrsimhadev to fight with this demon, the Lord is obviously enjoying this Veera rasa. You remember we discussed that. So whatever the demon is doing, it's anukul to Krishna, correct? It's favorable to him. The Lord is enjoying whatever the demon is doing, right? And he's also engaged in activity in trying to please Krishna from Krishna's point of view. It's Krishna Anushilanam also. So can Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha be called as devotees? We inherently understand that they are not devotees, but this definition of Anukulena Krishna Anushilanam seems to be limiting. This is what Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is pointing out. It seems to be limiting. It's too narrow or it is too broad. Because it's too broad because it includes all devotees, definitely, but it's also including the demons. How can it be? So that's not the proper definition. This is not how it should be understood. He continues. And he says, it is pleasing for him since he takes pleasure in fighting with them. Again, an illustration of definition being too limited. If Anukulya means pleasing to Krishna is given. When Yashoda left Krishna and went to take the milk off the fire, Krishna was not pleased. Correct? The milk is boiling, it's overflowing, and Yashoda kept Krishna down. And then what did Krishna do? He started kicking here and there. He started crying, he started wailing loudly because he did not like it. That mother has kept him there, and then she went to tend to something else. He became angry. Then he broke the butter pots. He stole it. He gave it to his friends. And then he started running in fear of Mother Yashoda. It's a Damodar Leela. We all know about this. So is Yashoda not a devotee now? Because she has displeased Krishna? It's not anukul to Krishna. And whatever activity is doing, it's not Krishna Anushilanam also. In one sense, yes, because the milk is supposed to be meant for Krishna only, taken from very special cows. In one way, it's meant definitely for Krishna. But from Krishna's point of view, it's not anukul now. Right? So Yashoda is not a devotee, right? It's too limiting in that way. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, therefore, in order to prevent the definition from being too extensive, which is the first case, and too limiting, the second case, the definition of Anukulya should be explained as devoid of hostility on the part of the performer. So there should not be any hostile attitude of the person who is performing a specific activity in relation to Krishna. So this then defines pure devotional service. Anukula means devoid of hostility. Did Hiranyakashipu, Hiranyaksha, Kamsa, Ravana, they have hostile attitude towards Krishna? Yes. So therefore they are not devotees. Although they are doing Anukulena Krishna Anushilanam, but still they are not devotees because they have hostile attitude towards Krishna. And does Mother Yashoda has hostile attitude towards Krishna? No. So although her activity at this particular point seems to be not Anukula Krishna Anushilanam, but still because she does not have a hostile attitude towards Krishna, she is still considered as a pure devotee of the Lord. So therefore this is the definition that should be understood. Okay. Right. So this will exclude the demons because they have hostility in the form of hatred for Krishna. This definition will also not exclude Yashoda because she is devoid of hostility to Krishna. Therefore, let bhakti be defined in terms of anukulya, a friendly attitude directed to Krishna. The word anushilam, which is modified by anukulya, is thus unnecessary. Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, so he says, okay, I'll just give a summary of this because I think a part of his commentary is missing. So he says that those just anukulya does not determine that one is a devotee of the Lord. And he gives an example of a pot. A pot, a mundane pot, it does not have any hostile attitude towards Krishna. Correct? And it can be used for serving Krishna also. So can we say the pot is a devotee? No. So it's like this. So bhakti cannot be defined only with anukulya or only with Krishna anushilanam. These two words are included in the definition of bhakti. Anukul means that which is favorable or have a friendly attitude towards the Lord or having a neutral attitude towards the Lord. The pot is friendly or favorable to the Lord. It's not hostile. Based upon the definition that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives, one who does not have a hostile attitude, no, he can be considered as a devotee. But a pot does not have a hostile attitude towards the Lord. Right? It is neutral. No, it's not a hostile attitude. But therefore, can it be considered as a devotee? No, it's a mundane object. It's a material object. So therefore, this is not a definition of pure devotional service. It should be both. And Krishna Anushilanam, we have already discussed. That Krishna Anushilanam, the demons are also Krishna Anushilanam. But then they are not considered as devotees. So therefore, both should be there. Definition of pure devotional service is Anukulena Krishna Anushilanam. Both should be there. Right. Then Prabhupada continues. The impersonalists sometimes misunderstand devotional service in such a way that they divide Krishna from his paraphernalia and pastimes. For example, Bhagavad-Gita is spoken on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, and the impersonalists say that although Krishna is of interest, the battlefield of Kurukshetra isn't. The devotees, however, also know that battlefield of Kurukshetra by itself has nothing to do with their business, but in addition, they know that Krishna does not mean that just Krishna alone. He is always with his associates and paraphernalia. So those places which are in conjunction with Krishna also, they also become worshipable. So Kurukshetra is also a place of worship for devotees. And devotees also go there. This is the place where Bhagavad-Gita was spoken. So devotees have a special significance for the place Kurukshetra. And this, we can extend that to Vrindavan, where Krishna's pastimes are performed. So it's Krishna Anushilanam means not only Krishna, his expansions and his pure devotees, but it also means everything that is in relation to them. So we are supposed to worship Vrindavan Dham also, Mathura Dham, Dwaraka Dham, Navadvip, Mayapur, like this. So they are also worshipable, and service rendered to the Dham is on the same level as service rendered to the Lord. So service rendered to the Dham also is pure devotional service. Now Mathura Vas is one of the Angas of Bhakti. So residing in Mathura is an aspect of pure devotional service. And we will see the glories. There are so many references that Srila Rupa Goswami gives that just by residing in Mathura, one can go back home, back to Godhead. Cultivate pure devotional service. One thing, that's all. Just one thing you do. Just reside in Mathura, go back home, back to Godhead. No, get love of Godhead. Pure devotional service is done. So how is that possible? Because the Dham is non-different from the Lord. So Krishna Anushilana means including his Dham also. But the impersonalists do not understand. They do not understand the absolute nature of the Lord. For them, everything is Brahman. And whatever associates paraphernalia, even the form of the Lord, it is all mundane. So therefore, they never make progress to pure devotional service. Even though apparently they may be performing the Angas of Sadhana Bhakti, but because their understanding itself is totally incomplete, they do not understand what is Bhakti. We are discussing the topics, right? We are discussing the definition of pure devotional service, what Uttama Bhakti is. But the impersonalists do not understand what pure Bhakti is. They do not understand Anukulina Krishna Anushilanam. They do not understand. So therefore, although they may perform the activities of Bhakti for advancing in spiritual life, still they will not make much advancement there because they do not know the definition of pure devotional service. It's just a deviation for them. It's diverted from the actual goal of love of Godhead. So impersonalists are rejected completely here. For instance, give something to, okay, you can read this at home. It's the same point which Srila Prabhupada discusses here. So he says that in Krishna consciousness, a devotee may be interested in paraphernalia locations such as battlefield of Kurukshetra, which are associated with Krishna, but he is not concerned with simply any battlefield. He's not associated with battle of Panipat, that worship battle of Panipat also. Not like that. He's concerned with Krishna. So the Dham, the places of Krishna or the Dham, it's special because it's in relationship to Krishna. his speech, his instructions, etc. It's because Krishna is there that the battlefield is so important. Right? This is a summary understanding of what Krishna consciousness is. Without this understanding, one is sure to misunderstand why the devotees are interested in battlefield of Kurukshetra. One who is interested in Krishna becomes interested in his different pastimes and activities. The definition of a pure devotee, as given by Rupa Goswami in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, can be summarized thus: his service is favorable and is always in relation to Krishna. Right? And then completes. Then we come to Anya Vilashita Shunyam Jnana Karma Dhyanavritam. In order to keep the purity of such Krishna conscious activities, one must be freed from all material desires and philosophical speculation. Right? Any desire except for the service of the Lord is called material desire, that is karma, and philosophical speculation refers to that speculation which arrives at the conclusion of voidism and impersonalism. So impersonalism is not in line with pure devotional service. So those impersonalists who engage in so-called activities of devotion, they do not reach the stage of bhava, prema. They do not get the ultimate goal. We discussed this yesterday, and we also saw an example of a person who is engaged in this kind of activities. So that is not pure devotional service, what he is doing. Although he may be claiming himself to be follower of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and then he is chanting this Hare Krishna Mahamantra also. So Jiva Goswami says this is Tatastha Lakshana, Anya Vilashita Shunyam, and Jnana Karma Dhyanavritam. So one should have only one desire, to serve the Lord, since bhakti is not devoid of desire. So impersonalists say, no desire. Desire should be made into zero. Anya Abhilashita Shunyam. It's not Abhilashita is equal to Shunya. It's Anya Abhilasha. The Abhilasha for devotional service must be there. Right. So there's one important point which Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says. He says bhakti which aims at achieving bhakti is proper. Bhakti which aims at achieving other goals is improper. So devotional service performed for gaining mukti or moksha, or devotional service performed for getting material gains, is not pure devotional service. It is not uttama bhakti. It is not proper. It is improper. In the verse, the phrase Anyabhilashita Shunyam has not been, in the phrase Anyabhilasha Shunyam has not been used. Instead, the phrase Anyabhilashita Shunyam has been chosen. This means devoid of other desires which are as deep-rooted as one's nature. Example he gives, in death-threatening situation, a devotee may say, means in a very emergency situation, inherently the devotee may say, "Oh Lord, please save me, your devotee now from this danger." Because it is a sudden, temporary desire, it is not harmful to his bhakti. Because what is the devotee asking? He is asking the Lord to save his form, to save himself from that particular misery. So therefore, that is not, so we can say, that's not pure devotional service. But that's why Srila Rupa Goswami says, Anyabhilashita Shunyam. Anyabhilashita means this, that in death-threatening situations or in a very emergency situation, if a devotee desires like this in an impulse, then that is not harmful to his bhakti. That is because this desire arises beyond his control, opposite to his devotional nature. That desire is not his nature, because his desire or his nature is to only render pure devotional service. Okay. Then Srila Prabhupada continues and he speaks about jnana or philosophical speculation. He says that this conclusion is useless. Which conclusion? The conclusion of voidism and impersonalism is useless for a Krishna conscious person. Only rarely by philosophical speculation can one reach the conclusion of worshipping Vasudev Krishna. This is confirmed in Bhagavad-Gita itself. The ultimate end of philosophical speculation must be Krishna, with understanding that Krishna is everything. Vasudeva Sarvamiti Samahatma Sudurlabha, the cause of all causes, and that one should therefore surrender onto him. Right? Bhavanam Janmanamante Jnanavan Mam Prapadyate. The real goal of jnana is that one should surrender onto the Lord. Not that he comes to the conclusion of voidism or impersonalism, saying the Lord has no form, devotional service is temporary. No, bhakti is eternal. It's not temporary. If this ultimate goal is reached, then philosophical advancement is favorable. Means jnana is favorable. But if the conclusion of philosophical speculation is voidism or impersonalism, that is not bhakti. So we will see this. We will see the Acharya's commentary. So they write exactly what Prabhupada is writing, but using the technical terms. Karma or fruitive activities are sometimes understood to be ritualistic activities. There are many persons who are much attracted by ritualistic activities that's described in the Vedas. But if one becomes attracted simply to ritualistic activities without understanding Krishna, his activities are unfavorable. Actually, Krishna consciousness can be based simply on hearing, chanting, and remembering. So Srila Prabhupada says here that ritual activities can be performed in relation to Krishna, and that can be considered as a form of devotion service or Krishna consciousness. So karma can be engaged, right? Varnashrama duties can be engaged in devotional service. It's not the definition of pure devotional service, but it can be engaged in devotional service. Like this karma mishra bhakti, like that. And similarly, jnana mishra bhakti also can be, there is a semblance of bhakti there. It can be done, but it must lead to devotional service. So not that jnana mishra bhakti is there, but the goal is jnana. Or karma mishra bhakti is there, but the goal is karma. I want to enjoy the material world. I want to enjoy the materialistic facilities. So therefore, I am performing bhakti. No, that is not proper. I want to do the speculation because I want to merge into the effulgence of the Lord. Or rather, I want to merge into the Lord, into Brahmajyoti. I am performing bhakti only for that particular purpose. That is also not pure devotional service. Jnana should lead to bhakti, and karma also should lead to bhakti. So that can be considered an aspect of devotional service because it is leading one to pure devotional service. It's a preliminary aspect. It is not pure devotional service, but it can lead one to pure devotional service. So therefore, it is kind of acceptable, is what Srila Prabhupada is writing. But then he clarifies. He says, but although that step is there, that from karma one can come to, if it leads to bhakti, that can be considered an aspect of Krishna consciousness. If jnana is leading to bhakti, that can be considered an aspect of Krishna consciousness. But actually, Krishna consciousness can be based simply on hearing and chanting and remembering. That is pure devotional service. Just hear, chant, and remember. Described in the Srimad Bhagavatam are 9 different processes, besides which everything done is unfavorable to Krishna consciousness. Thus, one should always be guarding against fall downs. Jnana Karmadi is mentioned. This is Karmadi, fruitive work consists of activities which are unable to help one to attain pure devotional service. So, it's Jnana, Karma, and all other activities which cannot take one to pure devotional service. So, many forms of so-called renunciation are also not favorable to Krishna conscious devotional service. So, this is the hint to this concept of Phalgu Vairagya and Yukta Vairagya. We are aware of these terms, but we will see this in detail when we discuss through Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So, Sri Jiva Goswami, he writes that Jnana in the second phrase refers to inquiry concerning the impersonal Brahman with no qualities. This should be rejected. But inquiry concerning the worshipable form of the Lord should not be rejected. For that knowledge is necessary in Bhakti. Right? Srila Prabhupada wrote all his books expounding the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. He gave a full commentary on Bhagavatam, which is actually a commentary on Vedanta Sutra. So Srila Prabhupada explains so much about jnana. But is it jnana? No, it's an aspect of devotional service because this jnana is in relation to the Supreme Lord. So therefore, this kind of knowledge should not be rejected. One should not reject Bhagavad-Gita because there are no gopis there. No, that knowledge is required. Bhagavad-Gita must be taken. Srimad Bhagavatam must be taken. The books of Srila Prabhupada must be read. One cannot just take to Krishna consciousness without understanding this jnana. That is why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that there is 3 aspects, Sambandha, Abhidaya and Prayojana. And one can engage in Abhidaya when he has proper and perfect Sambandha Gyan. So what we are doing here in Bhakti Shastra course is trying to understand this Sambandha Gyan. And then Nectar Devotion takes us even further to this Abhidaya aspect. And also explains the Prayojana also. So that's why it's good that we are this is the last book that we are reading as part of Bhakti Shastra course. Because Sambandha Gyan we have already understood in terms of Nectar of Instruction, Bhagavad-Gita, then Ishopanishad. Now we are speaking about Abhidaya process, the process of rendering actually using this jnana in devotional service to the Lord. And he says, Jiva Goswami continues, the word karma in this verse refers to daily and periodic duties enjoyed in the Smritis and not the actions of serving the Lord. For serving the Lord is the very definition of Anushilanam or service. So because I have to give up karma also, therefore, no devotional service, no service to the Lord also. That is also activity only performed through working senses. So therefore, I should not do that activity as well. That's not the meaning of it. Some people say, Sarva Dharman Parityajya. Because Sarva Dharma Parityajya, give up all dharma, therefore give up the dharma of devotional service also. And just take surrender. Just mentally you surrender to the Lord. Sarva Dharman Parityajya, Mam Ekam Sharanam Braja. Take surrender to the Lord. Take shelter of the Lord. How? In the mind. Because he has said, Sarva Dharman Parityajya. All dharma should be rejected. Bhakti is also dharma only. right? So dharmam to sakshat bhagavad pranitam. No, Bhagavan has given this dharma. That also should be rejected. Reject bhakti also, but surrender in the mind. So some people speak like this. But it does not mean that service to the Lord should not be stopped. There are angas of bhakti. There are devotional service must be performed for the pleasure of the Lord. That is the meaning. Not that we start speculating on the meaning of the verse which Krishna himself spoke. So Saradharman Paritejya Mamekam Sharanam Raja Aham Tvam Sarvabhavya Mokshaya Masachaya. Aham, take shelter of me means you render devotional service to me. That's why he says before that verse, Manmana Bhava Mad Bhakta Madhyaji Mam Namaskuru. He's already saying you worship me. And then he says Saradharman Paritejya. Right? So what it means that you have to worship him. With that particular attitude of worshipping him, you should give up everything else, which is so-called dharma, saradharman pariteja. But you should do manmana bhava mad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru, mame vaishyasi samshir, mame vaisya yuktevam atmana mat prana. This is 934, I think. But anyway, both are similar, 1865 and 934. So that must be done. Activities must be performed. Service must be done. It cannot be given up. Right? Okay. So this, finally, the conclusion. This is also from Srila Prabhupada's purport to this particular verse. From the study of Bhagavad-Gita, which is directly spoken by the Lord, we can have a glimpse of our eternal relation with the Lord. It is said clearly that the living entity must take to the service of the Lord, leaving aside all other engagements. There is further instruction in that book of knowledge that a man who preaches the teachings of Bhagavad-Gita is the most confidential servitor of the Lord. So the one who preaches is the most confidential servitor. Therefore, devotional service means preaching. From these, it appears that the nature of service which is acceptable to the Lord is generally engagement of a devotee constantly without any deviation in the service of the Lord, and that service, especially in this age of forgetfulness, is to educate people in the matter of God consciousness generally. So this is Prabhupada's definition of pure devotional service. Go out and preach. That is a perfect service to the Lord. Okay. So we'll finish. We'll not be able to start the first chapter today, but tomorrow we will do. And maybe we can extend on Saturday also. We will see how it goes tomorrow. Okay. So Sarvapadi Vinirmuktam, this is the verse from Narad Pancharatana, which gives the definition of pure devotional service from the Shastra, from the Vedas itself. So Srila Prabhupada writes, this verse you will already know. It's a very famous verse. Srila Prabhupada quoted many times. Sarvapadi Vinirmuktam Tatparatvena Nirmalam Hrishikena Hrishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Ruchyate. So Bhakti, so Srila Rupa Goswami has also quoted definition from the Narad Pancharatana. One should be free from material designation. Right? Sarvapadi Vinirmuktam. And the Krishna consciousness must be cleansed of all material contamination. He should be restored in his pure identity when he engages his senses in the service of the proprietor of the senses. So senses are engaged for actual proprietor of the senses, that is devotional service. So this is the definition. We should not think that because I have material body, material senses, I cannot do any service to the Lord. That is also a misconception that people have. Or some people think that, oh, when Krishna wants, then I'll do devotional service. Also not possible. No? Krishna, where does Krishna say that he does not want to do devotional service? He's saying, Saradharana Paritya Mamekam Sharanam Raja. No, come, do devotional service to me. Manmana Bhavan Bhakto Madhyaji Mam Namaskuru. So many times he says in Bhagavad-Gita itself that you have to become my devotee. But then there are some people who says, no, I will not engage in devotional service. When the Lord comes, he gives his mercy. By that, I'll become purified and engage my transcendental senses in the service of the Lord. Oh, whatever you have, you start engaging service of the Lord. That is pure devotional service. When the same senses, in conditioned state, senses are engaged in serving the bodily demands. And the same senses are engaged in executing the order of Krishna, our activities are called bhakti. Right? So, this is the purity of purpose and the platform of pure devotional service in Krishna consciousness. Shri Jiva Goswami comments, Tat Paratvena means with devotion to him, taking him as the highest object is the equivalent of Anukulyena. Right. Then Sarvapadi Vinirmuktam, devoid of all condition, is equal to Anyabhilashita Shunyam. Sevanam is equivalent to Anushilanam. Right? Anyabhilashita Sarvapadi Vinirmuktam, Tat Paratvena Nirmalam, Hrishikena Hrishikesha, Sevanam, Bhakti Ruchyate. That Sevanam means Anushilanam. Nirmalam, without blemish, is equivalent to Jnana Karmadi Anavartam. It's not contaminated by anything. It is pure. It is Nirmalam. So this is superior nature of Bhakti, Uttamatvam. It's understood by its very nature and thus is not stated in words. Which means Uttama Bhakti is not mentioned, but the characteristics of Bhakti is mentioned in this verse. Hrishikesha, Hrishikena, Hrishikesha, Sevaram, Bhakti Ruchyate, it's mentioned. But there it's Anyabilashita Shunyam, Jnana Karmadhyanavartam, Anukulena Krishnano, Shirlam, Bhaktir Uttama. Uttama Bhakti is mentioned. But here only Bhakti is mentioned. Why is that? Because the characteristics of devotional service itself is mentioned, which is at first Uttama Bhakti. Right. So this is our discussion on the introduction of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Then the first, the characteristics of pure devotional service, actually maybe we can see this first paragraph. Because here, Rupa Goswami gives a definition of pure devotional service from Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, so he's already quoted from Narad Pancharatra, and he gives a definition from Srimad Bhagavatam, which is included in the first chapter, first paragraph of Prabhupada's presentation. Right? So this he is referring to in Srimad Bhagavatam, this is third canto, Kapil Dev's instruction to Mother Devotee, 29th chapter, verses 12 and 13. So he says, Kapil Dev is saying to his mother Devotee, my dear mother, those who are my pure devotees and who have no desire for material benefit or philosophical speculation, right? No, Jnana Karma Dhyanavritam. They have no desire for material benefit, means no karma and philosophical speculation, jnana. Have their minds so much engaged in my service, right? Anushilanam, they are engaged in service, that they are never interested in asking me for anything except to be engaged in that service. So it's always anukul to the Lord. The service is always anukul. It's favorable to the Lord. They are not doing anything which is favorable to them. They are not asking anything for themselves. They are doing everything only for the pleasure of the Lord. So therefore this refers to anukul. You see, anukulena krishnanu shilanam, that is taken care of, and anyabilashita shunyam, they have no other desire apart from serving me, and jnana karma dhyanavritam, they have no desire for material benefit or philosophical speculation. So Bhagavatam itself is giving the definition of pure devotional service. Kapil Dev is speaking to Devotee like this. They do not beg to live even in my abode. So you don't even want mukti also. They don't want to live in my abode. They only want to serve. Srila Prabhupada writes, there are 5 kinds of liberation. To become one with the Lord, which is Sayujya Mukti. There are 5 types of Mukti. This is called Sayujya Mukti, where one becomes Yunjata, means one becomes one with the Lord. The desire is to become one with the Lord. To live with the Supreme Lord on the same planet, which is Salokya, the Loka of the Lord, and one wants to live, and that is Salokya Mukti. To have the same features as the Lord, Sarupya, same features as the Lord. To enjoy the same opulence of the Lord, Sarshti, so the same opulence as the Lord. And to live as a companion of the Lord is Samipya, means to always be in association with the Lord. So these are the 5 types of devotional service. And the devotee, while rendering devotional service, he does not do this devotional service with an idea to achieve one of these muktis. His goal is only to serve the Lord, only for the pleasure of Krishna. It's only anukulyana krishnanushilanam. It is not for any type of liberation. A devotee, what to speak of rejecting material sense gratification, does not even want any of the 5 kinds of liberation. He is satisfied simply by discharging loving service to the Lord. That is the characteristic of pure devotion. So this is the definition of pure devotion service. Okay. Then, so tomorrow we will discuss from text 17. And this chapter 1 has the rest of the first wave of Eastern Division, which is still 46 verses are there. So from 17 to 46 we'll discuss tomorrow, or try to discuss tomorrow. The first one, relief from material distress. Okay, I would recommend that you please read the first chapter before coming tomorrow. There are 6 things which we already discussed at the start of this class. Kleshagni, Shubhada, Sudarlubha, and all those things. So have an idea of what we are going to discuss. And it's amazing that there are so many references which we will try to understand tomorrow about the 6 characteristics of pure devotional service. Okay. So this first and second characteristic we'll be able to finish tomorrow. And I'll try to see if we can finish the others also. Or else We will see what to do now. We'll decide tomorrow if we can have a session on Saturday, or else we can do it on Monday as well. Okay, so I'll stop here. Any questions you have? We discussed. Yes, Prabhu. Yes, 5 types of liberation. To become one with the Lord is to merge into Brahmajyoti. To become one with the Lord means the Lord or the absolute truth means he has these 3 aspects: Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. And to become one with the Lord means one can merge in the bodily effulgence of the Lord. It is Brahmajyoti. That's also Mukti. Mukti because it is beyond this material world. It's transcendental to this material nature. So there is this material world, and even Brahmajyoti is spiritual only. But then there is no relationship there. There is no rasa. And because there is no rasa, one who goes to Brahmajyoti, he again has to come back to this material world. We discussed all this in our Ishopanishad. Okay, so we'll stop here. Srila Prabhupada ki Nectar